This is Chapter 9, which looks at building a team to drive success. So we're going to look at the importance of the management team and the key elements needed to complete the management plan section of the business plan. We're also going to look at recruiting, hiring, training, and motivating employees. We're also going to look at compensation plans and contracts for employees and management. So looking at the management team, managing a fashion retail business involves planning, organizing, controlling, directing, and communicating. And your management sets the tone of the culture of the company, so it's important that you have a really good management team in place. And the management team is also usually in charge of sales, finances, marketing, and operations, because one person usually can't do all these functions, so you're going to need to hire people to do each of these roles that have strengths in that area. However, in the startup phase, you may not be able to afford a management team, but you need to have a plan in place to hire management for certain tasks when you plan to bring those people in once you get through the startup phase and can afford to hire people, and also when you start growing. And the management team is actually more important than the product that you sell, because a good management team can sell any product. And in the management section of the business plan, you're going to need to outline the key personnel needed and describe how they would contribute to the team. And you're going to need to indicate where you have weaknesses within the company and how the team will compensate for those weaknesses. And in this section, you're going to need to define job descriptions and include an organizational chart showing whom each member of the team reports to. You will also need to address any contracts between the company and the employees. And you also will need to look at if you're going to have commissions or not. And before determining the job positions within your company, it's important to establish the culture of the company. And your organizational culture or company culture is the personality of the business, which is its attitudes, values, and communication style. So continuing looking at your organizational culture, it dictates the way things are done in a company, and it's an important first step in the management process. And your management defines it, and it should be embodied by the employees. And in it, there is a system of shared characteristics that is valued within the organization. And to create an organizational culture that supports the goals of the company, you must establish your core values and make sure they are carried out daily. So an example of this would be if your core value is taking care of the customer, then if management is on the floor working with employees, they can lead by example. So if they see someone, say a customer, walk in the door, they can stop what they're doing and go over and help the customer. And this reinforces to their sales associates that the most important thing is to take care of the customer. You also need to create an environment and a culture that makes employees want to stay. You need to make it fun and creative environment for employees, and you need to provide flexible work schedules and empower them. And companies that have been successful in creating an employee-friendly and relaxed culture tend to rely on certain principles. And the principles are balance, and this is respect for employees' lives away from work. And you want your employees to have a balance between work and life. So that's having a flexible work schedule would help them have balance. Another principle is direction, and this is giving employees a sense of purpose that makes them feel connected to the company. So they want to know that they have a purpose and that they're important to the company, and that what they do is, they want to know how what they're doing is helping the company. Also, another important principle is to value diversity, and companies who embrace and celebrate diversity and seek out a diverse workforce are employee friendly. Another thing is to have honesty, transparency, and integrity within your company, because employees like working for a company who is ethical and socially responsible, and they want to work for a company who communicates openly with them about issues that are important to them. Is a participative management style, And this is a style where your management team trusts and empowers employees at all levels of the company to let them make decisions and take action to get their job done. And employee input about different situations is also valued. And last is empowerment, and this is encouraging and supporting lifelong learning among employees. So an example of empowerment could be that you provide tuition assistance to employees, or another example of empowerment would be paying for employees to go to special schools to learn more. So whenever I worked for JCPenney, I used to get to go to different schools where I actually get to go to a manufacturer's facility and learn more about the weaving process and the dyeing process and the fabrication process. And that was a form of empowerment and increasing my learning about fabrics and textiles. Now we're going to look at leadership, because managers need to be leaders who are good at building a team in consensus. They also need to be good at managing conflict and balancing multiple viewpoints and demands and motivating employees. And leadership is defined as the ability to create an environment in which others feel empowered to work together to achieve a common goal. So an entrepreneur must learn to be an effective leader if they are to take the company forward and grow it. And you also need your management team to also be leaders. And employees want to be a part of the company, and they are more skilled and knowledgeable than those of the past. So we also need to make sure that we also try to form our sales associates and employees into leaders. And leadership deals with guiding and motivating people, while management is concerned more about logistics and meeting requirements. So effective leadership is based on hiring the right employees, building a culture that promotes teamwork, and then motivate employees to achieve higher levels of performance and also have good communication skills. So some important interpersonal skills that leaders and managers must possess. The first one is leadership, vision, and influence. And this is that managers need to be able to define who has what authority and responsibility in a way that motivates and gets everyone committed to the company. So your employees that you're over need to know what are their responsibilities and be committed to what the company goal is and getting it done. You also need to be able to clarify roles, tasks, and responsibilities, and make sure there is accountability and appropriate approvals. So people need to also be held accountable for their actions and for their job. Also, managers must also relinquish their power and priorities in the interest of the overall goal. So you have to be able to just give some things up and empower others. And they also realize that they are only as successful as their employees. So a real true leader doesn't try to do things on their own. They empower others and realize that they are successful because of the others around them. Another interpersonal skill that they need to possess is helping or coaching in conflict management. And this deals with being able to handle conflict, generate consensus decisions, and sharing their power and information. So a really good manager, they can get people to open up and get problems out on the table, and they don't become defensive when others disagree with their views of things. So they're good at conflict management and getting it open and out and fixed. They're also good at teamwork and people management. And to be able to do this, management needs to encourage creativity and innovation and take calculated risk rather than criticize less than perfect work. They also need to teach their employees to be independent thinkers by expecting and encouraging them to find and correct their own errors and to solve their own problems. But they also need to be seen as accessible and willing to help when needed if the employee has a question. They also need to provide the necessary resources for employees to do their job. And the last thing that is great for a management to possess is the capacity to generate trust. So effective managers are trustworthy, honest, and direct, and behave in ways that build trust. They do what they say they're going to do, and they're open and not guarded. Because if you trust someone, you will work a lot harder for them if you trust in them and you know that they're honest and that you feel valued. Now we're going to look at communication, because when you're developing your business plan, the ability to communicate effectively can mean the difference between succeeding and not succeeding in your business. And communication is the process of transferring information and ideas from one person to another with consistent understanding of meaning. And for a company to be successful, you as the entrepreneur must be able to communicate the vision or beliefs of the company to not only your employees but also to financial backers. And this is done by making sure that all employees understand the mission of the company, and then besides knowing the mission, they need to know how to carry out the mission. So you're going to need good written and oral communication when it comes to your employees, your customers, your vendors, and presenting the business plan internally and externally. So, for example, employees need to comprehend what they are asked to do and recognize that they have the authority to complete the task, and they need feedback on their performance to improve. Many times employees don't perform a task well because they don't understand what to do or how to do it. So now we're going to look at verbal and nonverbal communication. And if you look at box 9.1 of your book, it compares verbal and nonverbal communication and what it includes. So verbal communication is what is written or what is said. So examples of verbal communication would be the words that have been chosen to write or say, the tone of your voice, and the speed at which the message is communicated. So if your tone is harsh and it's quick, someone's going to think that you're upset with them. So those are important things to think about when you're looking at verbal communication. Nonverbal communication is how you act, such as your body language, gestures, expressions, and tone of voice. So for example, nonverbal communication could be your visual appearance, your physical touch, your posture, your facial expressions, your body language, and the distance you stand from someone when you speak to them. And because messages are interpreted and not always received as intended, managers must overcome verbal and nonverbal barriers to communicate effectively with employees and for employees to leave a good impression on customers. So even with your employees, you need to talk about nonverbal communication with them, because how they're dressed, how their expressions, their body language, and the tone of their voice will all affect how they deal with customers and how customers interpret what they're saying. So this is actually an important thing to look at and to work with your customers and your management staff. And also, if you look at box 9.2, it lists some obstacles employees and managers must overcome to communicate with others. And it's another great thing to look at because it deals with such things as distractions that can keep people from concentrating. It can look at the inability to be honest. It talks about selective listening or lack of sufficient knowledge of a topic will create a communication barrier, and timing of the message can also create a barrier. So those are other good things to look at when you are looking at your communication strategies that you're going to use and how you're going to train your employees. Also, another note on communication is looking at technology and communication, because technology has changed the way we communicate with one another. We now have email and text, and to be effective communicators, we must think about what is being written and how it is being interpreted. And you also need to encourage feedback from the communication recipient. So for example, if I was sending an email to my employees telling them something I needed them to get done, if you want feedback from them, you need to say something like, let me know your thoughts on this. What do you think we should do with this? Here's what I'm thinking, but what are your thoughts on that? And just so you can get communication back and forth and not one-way communication through technology. Also, you need to think about etiquette. So technology has really changed to where we do a lot more nonverbal communication than verbal communication, and so we need to make sure that we know how to communicate well nonverbally. Now we're going to look at motivating your employees. And looking at the picture, don't you wish all your employees look this excited about their job? Because we know in reality it's definitely not like that usually. So in order to motivate your employees, you must first understand what inspires and encourages them. And motivation is defined as the internal and external factors that stimulate desire and energy in people to be continually interested in and committed to a job, role, or subject, and to exert persistent effort in attaining that goal. So this is quite a task. So motivated employees reduce your turnover and increase your productivity and have positive morale, which results in well-served customers. And one way to motivate employees is through empowerment by drawing on employees' talents and creativity, and then just giving employees the authority to grow in their jobs, and then when they have done something new and succeeded, acknowledging that they succeeded is a huge thing. So that's another thing to look at when you look at setting up how you're going to train people, is the importance of motivation, and that your management knows how to motivate their team well and really understands their employees and how they're motivated. Another form of motivation that's used by a lot of retail companies is a performance appraisal. And employees, as we mentioned, are motivated by feedback and meeting performance goals. So you can use a performance appraisal to do this. So this is actually one that's from your book on page 196, figure 9.4. And it's also shown, part of it is shown in the slide. And performance appraisals give employees feedback on how they're performing in the company, and it allows the managers to set goals and set plans of improvement and reward goals that are not met or exceeded. So it's a great way to kind of know how you're doing as an employee and where you need to improve, and to kind of set goals of, okay, this is what I plan to achieve for the year. This is what I want to learn or grow at this year. And it really motivates them to keep going and just really have a clear path of what they want to work on and improve on. And I know we had a yearly performance evaluation that we did when I worked for JCPenney, but also it's great to even do them biannually, and so do them halfway through the year instead of waiting for a whole year to do a performance evaluation. So looking at the organizational structure, and this is the way in which the organization defines job tasks and how these tasks are divided and grouped and how they're coordinated. And the organizational structure will determine how employees interact with one another and will influence employee attitudes toward their jobs and employees. So as an entrepreneur, you need to ensure that your organizational structure is detailed out to what is to be done, how it's to be done, and who is to do what. And many times this simple step is not taken in the company. And then so some people can be very confused in what's their job and someone else's job. And then people can even get upset with each other because they think another person is doing what's supposed to be their job. So the typical organizational structure of a retail company would be a manager, assistant manager, and then sales associates. And each employee would have a different role and would be assigned a different task, but they would all work together as one team. And within like a bigger retail structure, you would have a manager under each department of, say, a department store. So this is from figure 9.5, and it's the breakdown of job responsibilities for a retail operation. And it's going to take a team of sales associates and management to ensure all tasks are completed. And funders realize this, and they will look over your management planning section to ensure that you've spelled out the roles of all the employees and the tasks that must be performed to make your company successful. So you'll need to delegate responsibilities to your team for these different areas. And in many cases, when you're starting your company, you're going to have much fewer employees, so they'll have to take on more than one division in some instances. And this is something that you're going to kind of need to put together underneath your management team section of the management plan that you'll do for assignment 9. So to create a breakdown of your job responsibilities for your company, which is what we just looked at, you first need to evaluate the task that will need to be accomplished on a daily basis by doing a job analysis. And a job analysis gathers information about the duties and the activities necessary to perform a job. And then you're going to develop a job description for each position. And you can interview managers of similar operations to learn about how they delegate duties and who does what within the company. And a job analysis goes beyond the specific task of the job to include a description of the conditions or the environment in which employees will work. So, for example, it needs to tell you if you're going to have to work nights and weekends also under the job analysis. And once your job analysis is created, you're going to create the job description, which will outline the duties and the responsibilities of the position based on your job analysis. And the job description clearly states what is expected of the person who will fulfill the position, and it defines the working conditions and whom the workers will report to. And it's beneficial for employees because they know what is expected of them and what their goals are, and it provides a basis for evaluation by management. And remember, we talked about how important it is for an employee to know what they're supposed to be doing and what their goals are and who they report to. And looking at your job description, it usually needs to be developed before you do interviews, and it typically includes the job title, whom the employer will report to, a brief statement regarding the major job duties, any specific skills needed to fulfill the requirements of the job should also be included. And in small companies, sometimes employees have to do additional duties, so job descriptions need to be updated and reviewed frequently, especially in a growing company. So, as our slide shows, this is a job description for a retail sales associate, and it's actually shown in your textbook on figure 9.7, and it just outlines the job description for a sales associate. And it also probably should have provided a section on tasks and duties would be to provide excellent customer service. So I thought it was kind of interesting that that wasn't included in there, since we keep talking about how important customer service is. So we've already been talking about the organizational structure of your company and how important it is to your business success, because everyone needs clearly defined tasks and responsibilities and needs to know who they report to. That's why you also should create an organizational chart, and it defines how the business is organized, and it illustrates the relationships among the job positions. So it just kind of shows who reports to who. And this is also shown in your book. It's figure 9.8, and it's an organizational chart for a fashion retail business. Another important step of management is hiring the right employees. And 2 qualities to look for when hiring are training and skills to do the job, and a track record that demonstrates his or her abilities. So good character and interpersonal skills are also important to look for employees. And employees are the company's most valuable asset, and they determine the success of the company. So once you know what you want to look for in an employee, through your job analysis and job description, you're ready to hire the right person. And many students look for an environment that promotes entrepreneurship, and this is working within an entrepreneurial capacity within a company where you get to use your creativity and skills. So hiring employees requires money and time and is an investment in the business, and it has serious implications in the future of your company. So it's important that you want to find people like students that are very much creative and have entrepreneurial skills and capacity. And those are the people that you want to hire because they're a good investment for your business. So depending on the structure of the company, it is usually overseen by a board of directors or an advisory team or both. And a board of directors is a group of people elected by the stockholders of a corporation who are responsible for overseeing its overall direction and policies. So this would be for publicly traded companies, and these are usually paid positions. While an individual entrepreneur, which is someone who starts a small business, will have an advisory team. And this could be anyone from an accountant, a banker, a lawyer, an insurance agent, or a marketing consultant, and they provide valuable input and aid in decision making. And they play a vital role in the company by complementing entrepreneurial weaknesses that the company has. And they help with decision making, especially in areas where the entrepreneur has limited knowledge and expertise. And your advisory team is usually unpaid. So, for example, if you have worked in a retail store and you start your own, and you are great about knowing managing and customer service, but you've never actually done the buying aspect, you would definitely want to have someone on your advisory team who has been a buyer and could help you with that. Your advisory team members could be other entrepreneurs, they could be web developers, they could be marketing specialists, and financial experts. And the last slide looks at the compensation packages that you can offer to employees, and this is just monetary or other value an employee receives in exchange for services. And they can include bonuses and employee discounts on merchandise, commissions on sales. They can also be intangible awards. And these give you more challenges, and they also include intangible rewards, which some examples of intangible rewards could be giving employees more challenges or different responsibilities. It could be giving them a better balance between home and work. It could just be announcing them as Employee of the Month. You know, giving them the Employee of the Month and getting a special parking spot. So those are some intangible awards. They can also, if it's a publicly traded company, you can get company stock. And this can affect if a prospective employee chooses working for you over another company. And as a startup company, you're not going to be able to afford a lot of monetary rewards, so you need to be creative and come up with rewards that your employees will want. So some other examples could be you could give them tickets to a play or a concert, or a gift certificate to a restaurant. You as the manager or entrepreneur need to determine what motivates your employees and reward them accordingly is the most important aspect of this. And this concludes chapter 9.